All right. Hello, this is Benjamin with Teach Me to Dive. I'm a technical diving instructor. I live in Idaho and teach technical diving. Specifically, I prefer to teach in the side mount. Now, we're really honored today to have the opportunity to interview and talk with Dene, who is a fantastic side mount instructor and highly recommended. In fact, I was asking in my peer group who I should interview, who would be a great side mount instructor, who could really get into the fine tuning and understanding of what side mount is, the challenges involved with side mount, what side mount does, the benefits of side mount. And everybody came back with a couple recommendations, but Dene was at the top of the list. And I thought, man, I've got to reach out to this guy. So Dene, thank you so much for taking some time with us. I appreciate you coming on and doing an interview with us.
Absolutely my pleasure, Benjamin. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Let's start with the obvious. How did you get started in diving?
So I started in diving. A lot of people are surprised at this, but I didn't get my open water certification until July 1st of 2012. So it's just coming up past 11 years. I got started back in 2011 when I was still together with my the mother of my children. We kind of having some rough times, and I said, hey, you know what? As a last ditch effort, let's go to Mexico and take a trip and try to rekindle. And so we're walking through. We were staying at the El Dorado Royale, and we were walking through the lobby one day, and they had all those tables set up for the excursions. Go to the pyramids, pizza, go to this town, and scuba. Okay, I had done it once or twice because my dad had a timeshare in Aruba, but my wife at the time did not have any experience whatsoever. I said, hey, you want to give it a shot? So yeah, I'll give it a try. So we signed up. They said, okay, be here day after tomorrow at 4:00 in the morning. I'm like, 4:00 in the morning? That's crazy. But anyway, long story short, they pick us up. We spend an hour and a half jumping to every freaking hotel it felt like in Cancun. And then we go to this little shop on the beach. Looks like a grass hut, but it's brick on the inside. They give us our wetsuits and our BCs and all that. And they start talking about the cenote. I'm like, oh, what's a cenote? Oh, it's great. It's an underground cave. You can follow this gold line. And now I'm stoked. Now I'm like, all right, this is going to go from being something like, okay. Because I had done just, a couple of open water discover scubas or resort dives. But that really piqued my interest. And get there, we get our stuff, we get back in the van, another hour and a half drive to this site where, I don't know if you've been to a cenote yet. It looks like a little puddle, probably this one was about 12 feet below ground level. And a bunch of people like jumping off a branch on a tree and like, all right, cool. I'm putting my wetsuit on. I said, where's this cenote? Where's this gold line? Oh, you can't go in. I'm sorry, excuse me, what? Oh, yeah, you got to be certified to follow a guide along the gold line. I'm like, Bob, my money's green too, Anyway, I didn't realize that at that time, so I didn't offer anything. I was just like, all right, you know what? So we basically spent like $700 to do a max depth dive of 12 feet. And the coolest thing we saw was a sunny that was about that big. Needless to say, I was a little disappointed, but we looked at each other and said, hey, let's go back to New York. We'll get certified. We'll come back. Back to New York. Marriage didn't work out. Sorry to say. But it is what it is. Everything happens for a reason. My new wife is amazing. I love you, honey.
Get that in there. The brownie points.
I just got married just over a month ago, about 5 weeks ago.
I saw that. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. She's absolutely fantastic. But so anyway, we kind of split up. I moved out and I needed somebody. It's a buddy sport, right? This is what diving's all about. You got to have a buddy. So I asked my brother, I said, hey, you want to try this? Well, I know somebody. He was in construction. I know this guy, Howie, and he's an open water instructor. He gave me his number, called him up. Yeah, call the shop. We'll take care of you. Done deal. Talked my brother into it. He said he'd do it with me, and his schedule just got crazy busy. So oddly enough, I wound up paying for the mother of my children to get certified anyway, just so I had someone to do it with. And that happened on July 1st of 2012. And that following October, he got certified. And I literally, Benjamin, I walked into this open water shop in Long Island, New York. And I walked up to the guy that owned the shop and I said, hey, I want to get certified so we go cave diving. I don't know how many people start that way, but I knew right out of the gate, my end game was caves. So it's been one heck of a ride. I dive a lot. I'm approaching 3,000 dives in, about 11 years, which is a pretty big number. I will say, obviously, teaching helps because I do count my teaching dives. Some instructors don't, but I do because as far as I'm concerned, it's more than 20 feet, more than 20 minutes. And I'm responsible not just for myself, but for my students also. So
Fair enough.
it's worth counting.
No, the funny thing is talking to a lot of different instructors that I know and guys at our level that do what we do. I found that for at least, and for myself included, you can go back to my open water instructor and he'll tell you that it was either day 1 or day 2 of open water that I was starting to ask about, how do you get to tech? How do we get to the point where we're slinging twins? And in that point, I didn't have any inspiration for side mount. So I just wanted to go down deep, stay as long as humanly possible. And if I didn't have to come back, that'd be wonderful. But, I realized that, there's certainly going to be limits, and I wanted to make sure I was safe. And I've talked to a lot of different instructors, and that's been their case. As they said, I got into the water once and I realized that this is what I wanted. I wanted more. I wanted caves. I wanted this. I wanted tech. I wanted twins. I wanted 5 tanks, in that same thing. So I get that completely. So I appreciate that you're in the majority with us, that are crazy enough to do what we do.
Bit by the bug.
It absolutely. And unfortunately, it can be a costly bug, but I don't think any of us have ever actually complained about having the gear.
No. And I will say, and I'm sure you realize this also, once you own your gear, it's a very inexpensive hobby.
Until you get ready to buy that next piece of gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had,
Absolutely.
my wife and I had 14 or 16 tanks going into October. And I told her, I said, we need to get some more. And so we bought another 10 tanks. And then my wife decided that the new K2 Black had come out and it was cooler than the K2 that I was diving. And so she said, I think I'm ready to side mount. I said, really? She says, yeah. Have you seen the new Black K2? And I said, yes. She says, that's what I want.
So it's just a fashion thing. Okay.
My wife is a fantastic side mount diver. I'm very proud to say that I certified her in December, and then in February I took her for her first big open water dives in Hawaii, and so she did fantastic, and I was extremely proud of how well it does. In fact, she's the inspiration behind the logo that we use for our Teach Me to Dive.
Cool.
Fun stuff. So who's your inspiration in diving?
That's a really good question. I've been blessed. I've actually done a lot of my instructor training with a very well-known, world-renowned side mount instructor. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case, but over the past several years teaching out of his shop, I have been blessed to meet lots and lots of very, very well-known instructors, divers, vendors, people that own companies. Like I know Lamar, I know Brian K. Cook, Christina Zanato. There's the list goes on. As far as an inspiration, that's a really, honestly, I'd have to say, which is weird at this point, but my current wife, and she didn't inspire me to get started, obviously, because I didn't even know her at the time, but she inspires everything I do on a daily basis now. Between her and the kids, like they drive every decision I make. So did she get me started? No. And back when I first started, I didn't know any of those people that I've just mentioned. For me, it was really all about, hey, you know what? I'm a small business owner. I own a couple of businesses. I work my tail off. I need something for me. I need a hobby. I need something that I can deflate. And unfortunately, I'm married to this little thing. So when I go diving, I get to just, bye-bye, and I get to just shut everything off and not listen to anything other than my exhale bubbles. That's probably my original inspiration.
There you go. The inspiration was to get away. I believe me, I understand. I have one of those jobs that there's more than once that I've thought, okay, it's noon. I'm going to cut out for the rest of the day and head to the water and go ahead and knock out a couple hours of dive time to that way I don't become a serial killer.
Absolutely. You got to just unplug every once in a while and totally deflate.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
So how did your first instructor inspire you to continue the process?
Inspired me to begin the process. Well, again,
to continue the process.
It wasn't really an instructor inspiring me. It was literally just the thing that really got me the most and initially was hearing about this cenote. I'm like, wow, an underground cave? I want to go there. Like literally just hearing about this gold line that you can follow. I was like, all right, I got to do this. And when they said we couldn't go, like, it wasn't even like a question, hey, do we go home and get, no, let's just go home and get certified and we'll come back. So
you're that guy. You can't do that. So yeah, watch me.
Absolutely. Don't ever tell me I can't do something. I will find a way. Even if it might be a little illegal. I mean, I didn't say that on camera, did I?
I can appreciate that. I heard a song lyric the other day that it's two of the lyrics said, one of them was, I can see myself doing that. And the other one was, I've never needed a reason to look for fire to walk through. And I thought, those sound very much like me.
Listen, if there's no fire to walk through, just start your own, right? I mean,
exactly. You know,
if you're a fire walker, I got a lighter and some gas. It's all good.
Let's go. You know, and I find that that's a kind of common trait with the divers. I mean, while we really work hard to make sure whatever we do, we're safe, we have a good understanding of the dynamic of what we're doing. We're utilizing, the correct protocols and grading factors that are based upon us. And we understand that. We're teaching our students at a very conservative grading factor to make sure that they're safe. But when it comes down to it, I mean, we do what we do because we like a little bit of that edge.
100%.
Absolutely.
There's always, and I've actually been in caves, in an overhead, where, like, there's a realization. And when you first start cave diving, you don't think about it, right? Because you're in class, you're learning, you're training, and your instructor's beating the crap out of you. I learned from somebody by the name of Dan Patterson, really, really, really excellent instructor. Works out of a shop in High Springs, or used to work out of a shop in High Springs. I did not have time to think about anything while I was in class. But as soon as I was done with class, like the very first dive that I did, the realization hit, I could die right now. And I mean, okay, I'm underwater. Like, I don't have gills behind my ears. So let's face it, it's a fact for all of us, right? But you've got plenty of gas. But stuff can still go wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'm just out of class. And what if I don't respond correctly? And, so there's so many things that can go wrong. But yeah, the edge that you speak of having that excitement, the unknown, what's around the next corner. Totally. Absolutely love it.
Well, it's interesting. I've discovered overall, I still remember that first time I broke 2 hours in one dive. And I remember right around the 40-minute mark, I can remember very clearly, without even realizing I was doing it, looking for the exit. Okay, the exit is, wait a minute, let's check the gap. Oh, God, I'm not even close to a third. What the heck? What am I doing? I've still got another hour and a half of left to go. And what the heck? And it was interesting. And the same thing happened about the hour mark. It was like, start kind of magically looking for that exit. And then it's like, no, I'm not even close to that. And then it continue the dive to the point. And then finally getting to that, that full 1/3 mark. And you're like, okay, now I need to turn the dive and start at least heading towards the exit. And right. So it's definitely a different mindset of what we do, of understanding that portion and changing where you're at to the next level. Absolutely. I get that. And especially being that overhead environment, you start looking up and realizing there's only one way out of here.
Well, a lot of times you go to Mexico and there's almost always multiple ways out, but you didn't come from that way. You don't know that it's still a valid path. It might have had a breakdown. There might have been a silt out, who knows, but
exactly. But
there's a lot of things to take into consideration, but more often than not, the way you go in is the way you're coming out. Absolutely.
Exactly. No, absolutely. So what's one thing you learned at the beginning of this process in your open water that you've never forgotten to this point?
What is what? I'm sorry?
What is one thing you've learned that you learned in open water that you haven't forgotten?
One thing that I learned in open water.
At the very beginning.
Don't use oceanic viper fins.
You learned the bad lesson.
Well, that's kind of like a loaded question. No offense, Benjamin, but like, what haven't I forgotten? Don't hold your breath. Any diving can call any diving tank for any reason. As a full cave instructor, DPV, CCR diver, like there's so much stuff that I teach, and a lot of that is going way back to open water class. I haven't forgotten. Did I forget who my buddies were? Probably. Who, the other people in the class, other than, the mother of my kids. Yeah, like that stuff I forgot. But the fundamentals of class, no, you've got to maintain all of that stuff. That's what muscle memory is about. That's what practice is all about. You can't afford, like we just said, we don't have gills behind our ears. We can't sometimes always have a direct descent to the surface. You've got to be able to properly respond, properly answer problems that come up. And whether it's a direct descent or a turn and, go back to where you came from, if you don't do something right, it can get really ugly really quick.
Absolutely. So the bad gear question, but I think it's one thing that it's interesting to try and instill in younger divers, because I've had plenty of open water divers that I teach, and I've got some dive guides that I've brought through the process as well, and they're just chomping at the bit to try and get into tech. I want to, it's fun to try and get in the idea. Look, slow down, take your time, understand the basics of what you're doing here, because everything you learn here, you need to have really down as muscle memory so that you're not even thinking about it anymore. So when you do get to the point where you're starting to sling twins, you do get to the point where you're starting to sling twins and side mount, or adding a deco bottle, or going into decompression procedures, or even a better example, or you're starting to head into tech fundies, where we're going to spend 4 hours minimum in the pool just doing skills in gear. Get that stuff down now. So it's a great lesson, I think, for to point out to the younger divers that will watch this and that we teach. Get what you're doing down now, because you're not going to head into tech at 35 dives. You're not going to head into tech. You shouldn't head into tech at 50 dives. You need to have a couple hundred dives under your belt of understanding what it's like to breathe underwater. At least that's my opinion. How do you feel about that?
See, so here's the catch-22, right? I haven't seen you in the water. I don't know how you teach, but with the following that you have, with the little bit that I've seen, I'm assuming you're a fairly decent instructor. Would I say great? No, because I don't know for sure. Nothing against you. But would you rather, Benjamin, take someone who's got 75 dives looking to do a cavern class or looking to do a wreck penetration class? Would you rather teach them? Or would you rather say, hey, go get some more practice and take a chance that they're going to go find another lesser instructor who's not going to do as good a job as you, and then therefore put that potential student in potentially life-threatening situations, So I have, and I agree with you, just for the record, when I first started, I didn't even do intro to tech until I had like 380 dives, right? That's just open water, the specialties, practice, all that kind of stuff. Intro to tech, I had, several hundred dives, advanced nitrox, deco procedures. By the time I was done, I believe I had somewhere around 450 dives, which is a fair number, in my opinion, before I start doing cavern, right? Hopefully you'll agree.
I do.
I've actually had people come to me with 50 dives, 51 dives, 35 dives. Hey, can I start cavern? Now, some people, for standards, I have to turn them away and say, hey, go get the minimum numbers, and, that's fine. But I've had 3 students that total number of dives under 100 total that I've certified for full cave.
Oh, wow.
Some people think, wow, that's crazy. Only less than 100 dives in their full cave. Listen, for me, if you can perform and do the skills, your buoyancy, trim, and propulsion are spot on, because I don't give you a full cave card if you're close enough. If you're not there, you're not there, period, right? So if your skills are good, okay, the only other thing that I want to try to ensure is that before they get a full cave card, they've had their first oh shit moment. If you need to bleep that, I get it. But
you're fine. We're on YouTube. It's all good.
Yeah. The concept of an oh shit moment, I'm sure you know what it is, that first moment when you're on scuba, because you don't have gills behind your ears, that if something goes wrong and you don't respond properly, you're not going home that night, right? That's a real oh shit moment. I've had 2 or 3 of those. They're not fun. And I don't think you should be diving in an overhead at full cave level, going to 4,000 or 5,000 feet back after a few months if you haven't had one of those yet. So I sometimes have to give my students one.
Fair enough.
It is what it is.
So for me, I'm in the same boat with you, and I agree exactly with what you're saying. My thought is as I get the younger students that are chomping at the bit, I bring them into specialties that I know will be beneficial to get them where they want to go. We talk about their career path with diving, and then figure out, okay, so you want to do this? You want to okay, let's get you to master diver. Let's get you to dive guide. Let's do a solo course with you. So you're starting to get those understandings of those pieces to give you all the tools so that you're able to be successful. Now, I do have one student that I've worked with that took dive guide, and literally on dive 7, he's done most of his dives with me. On dive 7, he was extremely comfortable. We had it perfectly balanced, and he looked like it was his 500th dive at that point. So when he started asking, "What's it like to get to master diver?" I was like, "For you, no, not a lot, honestly. It's just going to be a matter of getting the numbers in so you can qualify for it. But let's get a couple specialties down." And he qualified at all the minimum numbers, and I would feel comfortable taking him to tech. But I very much about evaluating where the diver wants to go, what they want it to look like, and where they're currently at. And so we can recommend a path and take them to where they need to go.
Right. I find that a lot of times, especially that early on in their career, like for everybody, people don't know what they don't know. I'm sure you've heard that saying before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Students don't know what they don't know. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? I don't know. I just finished open water 3 weeks ago. I've got like 7 dives in. I don't know. I know I like the water. I know I like this and I like that. Those type of people need to go out and just, try reef diving, try lionfish hunting, try lobstering, go catch some scallops, go do not a penetration dive, but go do a wreck dive. Obviously to do that, you should take a wreck class. So there are some specialties like for me, especially up north where I started, night, limited viz, navigation, wreck, rescue, stress and rescue, search and recovery, like all that. You're at SSI instructor, so you know all those. I started SSI also. Those 5 specialties are kind of like a given. Everybody up north should do all those, in my opinion. I did all of them, but until you start doing stuff, you don't know what you want to do. You say, hey, I just want to go and breathe underwater. Well, okay. So does that mean you're going to go to the same quarry every weekend for the rest of your life? I hope not. Well, come on, it's building experience. No, it's not. If you've got 1,000 dives at the same quarry to 40 feet every time, and you see the same stuff every time, that's not building experience. It's way too controlled of an environment. You're doing the exact same thing every time. All you're doing is building numbers. Yes, you're building a little bit of muscle memory and ingraining stuff, but you're not building real experience. You're just building repetition.
Absolutely.
So people should go out there, try different things. I know a ton of people that dive cave dives, and in North Florida, it's all fresh water. I don't dive the ocean. Why not? I don't like the salt. Okay, valid. So go do whatever you can in the caves and the springs and fresh water. That's fine. But I do it all. You should experience everything so you know what you do like and don't like. It's instead of just, I'm not going to like that. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I get that completely. We kind of answered this. That's a question a little far deeper in, but when you were coming up, and now with where you're at as an open water diver, what are 4 classes every diver should take? Why and in what order should you think they should take them?
Oh, I'm going to be honest, Benjamin, and tell you I can't answer that unless you can give me a geographical location, because the dives that any new diver should take is going to depend on where you're diving. Like if you're diving in California or Oregon or Washington, you're on the West Coast. Pacific Ocean is much colder. They do dry suit at the open water level. So obviously they got to take dry suit. Do you need dry suit if you're diving in the Southeast in Florida? In caves, maybe, but open water in the summertime? No. So it has a lot to do with geographical location and where you're at and the type of diving available to you. If you're diving the Great Lakes, you want to do dry suit also. There's wrecks there, you want to do wreck. So like I said, where I started, night limited viz, wreck, and obviously that's not wreck penetration. That's just the generic SSI. Don't go in the wreck kind of wreck diving. Nitrox, definitely something everybody should take. Stress and rescue, search and recovery, and let's see what else. At this point, I'll say side mount. I wasn't side mount. I was doing single tank back mount, and then I progressed into HP 119s banded on my back. Luckily, I don't have to wear those anymore, but I still have them, and I dive them if I need to. But like you, I'm almost always side mount.
Yep. I agree. And that's exactly where I'm at as well. We just got back from Florida in February, spent 10 days there. And the only thing I took with me, we were doing 6 boat dives, and then the rest of it we were going to do we did shore dives, and all I took was a side mount rig with me. And it's fun to get on a beginner boat, because there's a few times where all was available was a 60-foot reef, beginner, no drift, and gear up in my side mount, and people look, ooh, what are you doing? This magical thing of side mount.
You're a tech diver.
Exactly.
Not really. Side mount's not really tech, but for you it is.
For you it is. Absolutely.
If you got 8 dives in and you just did single tank back mount with a jacket, yeah, side mount is tech. But in the real world scheme of things, side mount is just a different configuration you can dive.
Absolutely. And I did all my boat dives in just single tank configuration, and jumping off. And it's once you get the idea of what it is, I don't think you ever go back, to be honest with you. I've had more than one student come back to me. I have one student that's got 10,000 hours underwater. He was a commercial diver, and 3,000 actual recreational dives that I just took in a side mount. And he says, I'm looking to try this. I'm not sure. I think this will be great. It looks like a better deal than slinging twins. And said, okay, well, let's get you in. And he got the rig, and we built it up and got him trimmed in. And in about 5 minutes, we had him perfect in the water. I made a mistake on the length of one of my bungees on his left side, and so I had to untie it, retie it, and I just did it underwater, no big deal. But we came back up after that 5 minutes of him kicking around after it was perfect, lined out. He says, I'm not going back.
Yeah, I've had that 100 or 200 times. Yeah,
absolutely. It's
a very common thing for back mount divers to say once they try side mount.
Absolutely. And I agree completely. Well, what's something you wish you'd learned at the beginning of this that would have helped you where you're at now?
Something I wish I had learned at the beginning, as far as open water,
or as you first started tech, somewhere early on in your diving career. What's something you wish you'd learned early on in your career that would have helped, if you'd had a better understanding of it, it would have helped you better now where you're at?
That's a really good question. What would if I had learned, would have helped me better now? I can't say that I can pinpoint anything, honestly. I have had a great fortune of not having a single bad instructor ever. Awesome. So I did my open water with this guy, Howie. Didn't know any better, but it was a solid open water class. Then I did my advanced nitrox, intro to tech ANDP with Jim Vafius. He was a phenomenal instructor. Then I did Cavern with Dan Patterson, actually Cavern and intro with Dan Patterson. Then I did Apprentice in Full with Paul Heinerth, Stage Cave with Jill Heinerth, and then a bunch of stuff with Ed Sorensen. Yeah, I can't say I've had any bad instructors. I guess if I had...
You've had some really good ones, though. I mean, you mentioned Jim and Jill, and I mean, those are just really icons in our industry.
Yes. Yeah, I have been blessed, without a doubt. I sought out instructors based on their experience, their knowledge, their background, and their skill, not just, oh, hey, this is the closest or cheapest instructor I can find. Let's be honest, I'm sure you know this, you get what you pay for, right? If you're looking for that $69 or $169 open water class, I'm not your guy. If you're looking to spend $150 a day for overhead training, I'm not your guy. If you're looking for really decent, I'm not going to say I'm great, but decent instruction that's going to make you work and earn and not give you a card because you handed me cash, then I might be your guy. But I might not still. Everybody who's taking a class, reach out to several instructors, interview them, see who can give you what you're looking for better than the others. There may be someone who's closer, but a little more expensive. Or there may be someone who's in a totally different state, but their reputation's worth it. Don't chimp out. This is not a hobby that you should be looking for the cheapest or fastest. But to answer your specific question, I would say, if anything, if I could go back and do it again, I would do side mount sooner.
I agree 100% with that. That's for sure. Yeah. So how'd you end up becoming an instructor?
Um, I was a diver, and I immediately, as almost every instructor on the planet feels, you want to help, right? Hey, I love this. This is a great hobby. This is a great activity. This is, these are great people. I want to help this one. He's new. Let me go help him. And it's something that hit me hard. And I immediately, after open water, and I did a couple specialties, I signed up, for the pro track with SSI for that open water shop I was dealing with. And right after I signed up, hit dive guide and all that, I was working on dive master. And then I started doing intro to tech, advanced nitrox and deco procedures, where I was being taught to hover instead of kneeling on the floor, where I was being taught to do proper gas shares, where I was, just, as it's a totally different type of diving as opposed to recreational. Hey, let's just get you through this class so we can sell you another class type of instruction. Mm-hmm. Tech instruction is a lot more serious. So I quickly realized that I'm probably not a good enough diver that I should be helping anyone else yet. Let me work on me first. And that's when I started doing intro to tech, advanced nitrox, deco, cavern, intro, apprentice, and full. Once I got my full cave card, I was like, okay, now I'm probably okay to become an instructor. So I didn't get my open water instructorship until I believe it was November of 16. I'm sorry, August of 16. So 7 years. I teach open water, but not a lot. Most of my instruction is overhead. I love teaching overhead. Cavern, intro, apprentice, full, cave, DPV, whatever it may be. I love teaching in caves. I love diving in caves. It's clean. It's fresh water. I don't have to wash my stuff or soak it after I'm done diving. So it's a shorter day. It's an easier day, sort of. But yeah, I just I wanted to help people, but I did start and then put the brakes on and then got back to it in 16.
Fair enough. So would you do it all over again?
Yes, I would definitely do it all over again. I can't say I would go to instructor sooner. I can't say I would change anything, but I would totally do it exactly the same way. I have no regrets whatsoever, other than maybe going to Mexico without having the cert first.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. We see a lot of that, though. And I've had more than my share of open water students that went down to Mexico to do a DSD or start through that process, or they did the slam bam, thank you, ma'am, do 2 hours of class. We're going to throw you in the water for 4 dives and you're going to be an open water diver too. And with oh my goodness, I had a family not over the summer, and I love this family because they're close friends of ours. And 2 of them, one of them had such aggressive bariotrauma during his dive because they didn't teach him how to clear, that he'd actually shattered an eardrum and was out of the water, couldn't go in the water for 3 to 4 months. And wow. When they came to me, the wife said, and the daughter both said, we can't clear our ears. We probably are not going to be able to pass your class. And I don't know about my husband either, because he shattered his eardrums trying to do this. So there's, out of the 6 people in the class, 3 of them are telling me, we're probably not going to be able to pass your class. And I said, well, tell you what, let's just slow down and let's see where we end up. I think we can do this, but we're going to take it one step at a time, and we're going to go down 1 foot at a time until we get this figured out. Yep. They passed my class. They immediately 2 weeks later went to Mexico. And they send me pictures of, they've been on 3 trips now since then, and send me pictures all the time. So it's definitely one of those things.
Cool. Very cool.
Well, Dean, tell me about your favorite dive. Why was it your favorite dive?
Favorite dive. That's a really loaded question for a cave instructor. There are so many dive sites available. Like I'm literally, 300 yards from the Merritt's Mill Pond. The Merritt's Mill Pond is a body of water that from Google Earth, it looks like the world's shortest river, because it's about that wide and 4.5 miles long. So, but it has 8 caves on it. So having 8 caves that close is awesome. I've also got the Gulf of Mexico an hour away. So to pick a whole dive, got to say I can't do it. I could pick certain places and certain caves. I love Kings Canyon and Jackson Blue. I love Rocky Horror and Madison Blue. I love diving the USS Oriskany out in the Gulf of Mexico. World's largest artificial reef, 997 feet long. It's an awesome dive. You could dive that artificial reef by, I don't know, probably 300 times and not see the whole thing. It is massive. Great place to go. I love lionfish. My new wife, Shelby, she loves lionfish. So we go there every once in a while, catch some fish, come home and cook it. So I could pinpoint a couple of different scenarios or places, but like an exact dive, really tough. It's really tough. If I'm blowing bubbles underwater, or even if I'm not, if I'm in CCR, there's so many places that I enjoy.
I agree. I could see that. And I could tell you my favorite dive changes from day to day and dive to dive as well. My wife's favorite dive is was recently in Side Mount. It was the last day of our diving. We were out and we did mile marker 4 out of Kona, which it's just in a little cove. The deepest you'll get is 40 feet. We spent 2.5 hours cruising the reefs at 40 feet. And my wife was just in seventh heaven. And honestly, because my wife was in seventh heaven, I was in seventh heaven. For me, I like the deep stuff. I like to go long and deep and deco out and shore dive. Those are my favorites. But she was I could see the joy through her mask, and that made me so happy to watch her kick along and just enjoy finding, this and that and the other, the blowfish and the crown of thorns. And she's really enamored with crown of thorns and the eel. So for me, it changes, but that's one of my favorites. And that's why, it's because my wife was happy.
Cool.
Dene, what do you think you've contributed to the dive community?
What have I contributed? Honestly, Benjamin, I am, I help run a conference here and there. I volunteer at some other conferences, some cave diving conferences, I'd have to say that probably the only thing I would feel comfortable saying I've contributed to the community, I've made some people better divers, hopefully. And that's all I try to do. I'm not striving to be the best at anything. I'm not striving to be better than you or him or her. I just literally just want to help people not kill themselves underwater. Sorry, it's a dark, gloomy picture, people, but I paint them, and I paint them really dark because, like I said earlier, it doesn't take much for it to go sideways and not go home that day. So if I can help one extra person be a better diver, okay, I've done my job.
Fair enough. And that's, and I think that's one of the most important things we as people can do, is be an impact and a source of joy or inspiration for somebody else. And if you can do that to one person, I think that's success.
Absolutely.
So, Dene, what are you really known for? What, if I were to talk to the community, what would the one thing that everybody would say that you are known for?
Well, you said we're on YouTube, right?
We are on YouTube.
I have been told that I'm a dick. And I often admit it to my students. But I also admit to them that it's only when I'm in the water. I'm a nice guy. You want to hang out, go to the bar, have a beer, have a dinner, that all good. Once I'm in the water, once we're in training, all bets are off. There's cave gremlins that come out. They don't cause your issues. They just point out your inefficiencies. There's no footage of me ever, so it doesn't count. People say it's me, but unless it's on video, it didn't happen.
I agree completely.
Yeah, cave gremlins come out and they cause problems or point out, mistakes that you're leaving that are things that could, cause you to not come out one day. When two students go into a lights out touch contact gas sharing drill and the recipient takes the donor's rag and puts it in and leaves their regulator right here not clipped off, the gremlins will take that and take it off from around the neck and clip it to the line, and they'll get stuck. And I've had students sit there and kick for 7 minutes going nowhere. And, it's amazing. People don't realize it, but those little things can make all the difference. So I am a dick underwater. I admit it.
There's nothing wrong with that. I get it completely. And I enjoy teaching the technical classes as well as solo class. There's nothing more fun than overtasking somebody and getting them the understanding of This is what happens. This is your oh crap moment. You've got to work your way through this. You stop and think. You've got gray matter between your ears for a reason. So
Absolutely.
I agree. So let's get into it, Dean. What is technical diving and how is it different than recreational diving for you?
For me, okay, so again, some people call side mount technical. I don't. Some people call doubles technical. So I guess the best way I could explain it, or for me, how I look at it, just because you're bringing either banded doubles that are isolated or independent doubles that are not isolated or side mount or whatever it may be, you're bringing extra gas. That's it, right? So if you're still flutter kicking, that's not technical. But are you frog kicking? Does that mean it's technical? I don't think so. I personally think easiest way to answer this, if you're not doing deco, you're probably still doing some type of recreational diving. You're not down long enough and deep enough to get into a committed stop. And if as long as you're not doing committed deco dives, then as far as I'm concerned, call it recreational. I don't care. What's going to make it technical? Because you're doing rec penetration? Well, what if you're doing a swim through? If you swim in one doorway and the other one is 20 feet away and you've got daylight the whole time, is that really technical?
No.
It's very subjective, Benjamin. You know what you think is technical, I may agree with. What someone else thinks is technical, I may disagree with. But for me, if you're doing deco, you're definitely doing tech diving. If you're not, really good possibility you're still just recreational diving with more gas.
Fair enough. And I would agree with that as well. And you're not really technical diving until you're breaking the limits of decompression.
Absolutely.
Because you can certainly do a 2.5 hour dive. My wife and I did our 40-foot dive. We took 2 tanks, 2.5 hours out diving at 40 feet. Not once did we come close to deco. That's just an extended recreational dive. Yes, we had 2 tanks. Yes, we had a technical setup and we have the ability and understanding what we were doing, but it was just a really long recreational dive. So,
yep. 7-foot hose doesn't make it technical. Extra gas doesn't make it technical.
No. Good.
Just a better way to dive.
Yep, absolutely. And just because I have a big off-road 4-wheel drive truck does not make me a professional driver.
Right.
I try to explain that to people as well.
Absolutely.
So, Dean, how should technical divers prepare themselves physically and mentally for the more challenging dives?
So most people I could see saying, oh, practice, 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 muscle memory, get all that in, do your homework, Yes. So have you heard of Gareth Locke?
Huh?
Okay. So his human factors course, we're actually hosting one here.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
So I'm actually just going through the very first of his courses. And I realized, and I actually put a post up about it yesterday or the day before, like a spark went off. Just because you're building muscle memory doesn't mean you're getting necessarily better. Can you respond quicker and do that motion quicker? Absolutely. But what if you respond so fast that you respond to the wrong problem? Hey, this problem looks like it's this, but it's really something else, but you respond to that problem. Now you're 2 seconds behind the curve because you started to implement an incorrect solution. That make sense?
It does.
So, yeah, I let's go back to what I said before. Going to the same quarry time and time again does not build experience. Hey, I go to 103 feet every time I go to the hole at Dutch Spring. Doesn't build experience. The best thing that technical divers can do is, as we hinted to before, don't do technical classes when you're 37.5 dives in. Build some experience, build some practice, build some background, and then build towards those bigger dives. Progressive penetration, so to speak. Not always the case for overhead diving. You could be doing, a dive on the Oriskany. Hey, I'm going to go to the flight deck. Well, that's 150 feet. Do you go straight from, your 60-foot open water graduation dive down to 150 feet? No, you take a deep course and then you go to 80 and then 90 and then 100 and then 110 and 130. Progressive penetration, work your way into everything. Don't jump too quick. Take your time. Do things slow and with precision so the accuracy is there.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we talked about earlier is making sure to take the time to make sure you're ready for the next course.
Absolutely.
So, Dean, what are the most important safety considerations for technical diving, and how do you think divers can mitigate those risks the most efficiently?
Dive as if. So this is a philosophy I came up with probably 2 or 3 years ago. People ask me, what does it mean? Why am I going to dive a SIF? What is a SIF? Whatever. So diving as if is all about, it started out with cave diving and it's grown to so much more than that. I started explaining to students, as you're penetrating into the cave, you need to pay attention to your surroundings. You need to be line aware, light aware, cave aware. Where's the line tied off? How many arrows did you pass? How many tie-offs did you pass? Where are you in the cave? How deep how much gas do you have? So when the fit does hit the shan and you lose all your visibility, you're not like, oh my God, where am I? How much gas do I have left? Right away, that type of response, if you could tell probably by the tone of my voice, I was tense, I was a little nervous, maybe even a little afraid, because I don't know. If I have that knowledge in the back of my head, I'm diving as if, I know where I'm at. Last time I looked at my gas was just a few minutes ago and I had, let's say 2,700. So I didn't turn pressure. So I know I've got enough gas to get out. Okay. Last arrow I saw was, let's say 1,700. So I've got maybe, if I missed an arrow, maybe 1,800 and change. All right. Well, if I got to this with less than a third, I've got enough to get out. And I should be able to know how many arrows, how many markers, how many tie-offs, all that stuff in the back of your head when something goes wrong will help keep you calm, cool, and collected. Because what happens when you get nervous, Benjamin?
Oh, you don't make
your physiology changes, your heartbeat increases, your breathing rate increases. Guess what's going to happen if your breathing rate increases? You're going to go through more gas.
Oh, yeah.
And if you got from point A to point B with less than a third, it is still possible to use more than that on the way out if you don't control the physiology. Make sense?
Absolutely. And that's interesting you brought that up because that's exactly how I dive as well. But I got that originally from, I took a motorcycle course many years ago, motorcycle safeties course called STAR. And that was exactly what we talked about it. Ride as if, play the what if game as you're going along, as you're riding on your motorcycle, you're in traffic. What if this guy pulls in front of me? What if this, what if that? And there's a tremendous amount of really bad drivers out there. And when you're on two wheels and a lot smaller than them, you don't always have that option to do what you'd like to do and be out of the way. So you have to drive as if. And so I like that. I'm definitely going to adopt that as well as part of my my teaching. And I think that's the greatest honor any instructor give another instructor is to adopt a little bit of their mantra and add it to their own. So
I'll send you stickers if you want. I've got a couple thousand stickers if you want. I'll send you to give away to your students.
I will happily take as many. I'll make sure to get you our address. In fact, we'll make that a thing. So whoever gets the most comments on this, we'll make sure to send them a sticker too. How about that?
Absolutely. I'll send out. I'll tell you what. I'll give you a couple dozen. You can give away to whoever you want. But yeah, whoever gives the most comments, or the first comments, or the 12th comment, however you want to do it, that's entirely up to you. But it started out with a dive as if anything and everything that can possibly go wrong is going to go wrong right now. If you're ready for it, if you're prepared for it, it's just going to be a dive-ending situation instead of a life-ending situation.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, you sent a T-shirt to a close friend of ours, Craig. Renee and Craig are very close friends of ours. So I saw your T-shirt. So I think you did Renee's cave course, if I remember right.
I did. Yep.
I love Renee. She is just a ball of fire. That's for sure.
She is a very awesome woman, without a doubt.
Absolutely. All 4 feet of her. So
I think she's 4'12", which, by the way, my wife Shelby is 4'12" also.
There you go. No, they came just a few weeks before they saw you. They came out and went ice diving with us. So it's that small a world.
Very cool.
So, what are the most common mistakes technical divers make, and how can they be avoided?
The most common mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Single word, starts with a C and rhymes with complacency. Honestly, I think complacency is one of the biggest things in this industry that is the worst thing that you could have around you at any time while you're diving. Don't become complacent. Don't become lazy. Don't become, oh, it'll be fine. I'm sure you've heard, I don't know if any of your listeners or watchers ever heard of the phrase normalization of deviance. It's something that it can be really bad. I've got a golden rule. Yes, there's the, hey, never hold your breath. Yes, there's the, any diver can call any dive at any time for any reason without ridicule. For me, any three things go wrong, I'm out. I'm done. Dive's over. If I'm not even at the site yet, I turn around and I go home. Obviously, there's a caveat. If I'm teaching a class, I can't do that. But when I'm teaching, it's a very mundane dive for someone like me. Even at full cave, max penetration is 800 feet. If I can't get a full-on panic student from 800 feet in a cave, then I should probably hang up my fins. But I've done a pretty good job so far. But yeah, I think complacency is probably the biggest thing that people just need to completely stay away from.
I agree with that. We had an interview recently with Dan Orr from Dan Orr Consulting, formerly of Dan.org. And that's something we discussed in detail, as well as normalization of deviance. I love that. And it's something that we teach. I start teaching in open water. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I start with, even at open water level, like I said, I don't teach a lot of open water, but when I do, I start right away, horizontal trim, no kneeling, no touching, hovering. If you can't do a skill hovering neutral, then as far as I'm concerned, you can't do it at all. So
absolutely,
keep people on track, keep people on point, push them to be better. Most people don't want to just barely get by. Most people want to do the best that they can. And in a life-threatening situation or a life-threatening hobby, definitely should ring true.
Absolutely. So here's kind of an interesting one that I think all of us struggle with to a certain degree, but not really. But can you discuss the importance of team diving and technical diving? But more importantly, how should divers choose their dive buddies?
Oh, man. Very, very, very good question, Benjamin. And I will say, I don't hear this question anywhere near often enough. A lot of people will just pick either a loved one, a relative, a friend, or just a de facto, hey, I'm at the dive site. My regular buddy didn't show up. Hey, you want to go for a dive? All right, cool, let's go. And that's totally fine. But let's face it, if you are, I don't care how good of a diver you are, how many dives you have, how experienced you are, how new you are, it doesn't make a difference. You come up to somebody, you don't just say, hey, my name's Dean. Nice to meet you, Ben. Let's go for a dive. Right? You should never, ever, ever do that. There should be an interview and not like, okay, Mr. Hadfield, how many dives do you have? It doesn't have to be that kind of interview, right? Just a very relaxed, you don't want to have people's antennas go up and alert them to the fact that they're being interviewed. But you as a diver and a human being that wants to go home and see your wife, girlfriend, husband, boyfriend, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, should know who you're getting in the water with. Hey, Benjamin, you want to go for a dive? Sweet, cool. So you dive here often? Oh, yeah, cool. All right. How many dives you got? Oh, 4,000. Sweet. That kind of stuff. When was the last time you dove? This is a big one because a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I got 3,000 dives, but I've been out of the water for 20 years. They didn't say that out loud, So there are answers that can give you a incorrect security feeling. You got to know what to ask and how to ask it. And if you get in the water and say, sweet, let's go for the dive, and all of a sudden the person you're diving with said they've got 3,000 dives. The last dive they did was last week, and then all of a sudden they get in the water and they're flutter kicking 30 degrees out of trim. Right away in my head, I'm dialing back that dive plan. I'm no longer going to 4,000 feet into Jackson Blue. I'm going to thumb it and turn the dive at 800. And if I have to say, oh yeah, my stomach hurt or whatever, I'd rather turn the dive and live to dive another day than push into something where I don't belong with that particular person. I might be fine on that dive by myself or with someone else, but with a brand new Insta buddy, definitely could be a detriment to your going home that day.
No, absolutely. And I can't agree with you more on that. We were on a dive boat in November off the coast of Florida. It was the only boat we could get on for the last of our vacation because of the hurricane. Not that Florida ever has hurricanes, right? But the young lady and the young man that were sitting across from us, she was very excited and she very loudly progressed, "This is my 9th dive. Can we dive with you?" And I looked at her and says, "Fantastic. This is my 9th dive too, but I feel like that maybe you should stay with your dive guide. We'll stay with our dive guide. That might be safer for the both of us."
How many dives did you have at the time?
Oh, I'm somewhere north of 2,000. This was just a couple months ago, back in, 5 months ago, back in November of 22. So not that long ago. So I've got a tremendous amount of dives, and I'm an instructor, but I don't get on the boat letting people know that I'm an instructor. And, I do my thing, and my wife and I will do our dive because we're fantastic dive buddies and have all our dives together. But I don't progress hey, by the way, I'm a technical dive instructor. And because what kind of problems that tends to create on a dive boat. And especially when we start pulling out, technical dive gear, I try and hide that as much as I can. And, I'll talk to the skipper, and I'll talk to the dive master, and talk to the other people generally. But, what I'm talking about. You've been there.
Absolutely.
We've all been there. So
I get onto a boat, no matter how big or small the boat. And typically the boats I go on now are usually 6-pack doing technical dives in the Gulf. But if I go, let's say, South Florida, and I'm in the Keys, and I'm going out on a cattle boat, I will give them the absolute minimum. Hey, Mr. Ulmschneider, yeah, Dean, okay, that's me. You have your cert card? Yep. And I show them my AOW card.
exactly.
Because if not, hey, you're a full cave instructor. Hey, that guy over there is a regular. He's like a mess. Can you keep an eye on him? Yeah, if you pay me a guide fee, absolutely. It's your insurance. It's your boat. Why should I put myself? No.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
that's exactly what Nikki and I do as well. We show our lowest card. We don't talk about being instructors or anything like that. And like I said, when she popped out, she says, I have 9 dives. And I says, fantastic. So do I. And then I pulled out some. She's like, you look like you have more than 9 dives. Well, I might have a few more than that. But, again, you go with your dive guide. We're going to stay with our dive guide. No offense. We're going to do our thing. We're here to do our dives. And, tell us about your dive when you get done. Let's see your pictures. We'll share. We'll swap pictures.
I'm a little different, Benjamin. If another customer on the boat came up to me and said, hey, you look like you know what you're doing. Can you help me out? I'd be more than happy to help. I'll even dive with them if the people ask themselves. But if the boat asks, sure, as long as you pay me. Otherwise, as an instructor, I want to help as many people as I can. So if somebody asks, I'll be more than happy to help.
Our standard answer to when we see people doing something wrong or heading in the wrong direction is, would you mind? Are you open to a suggestion? And if they're no, I got this here. And then if it looks like it's dangerous, then get the dive guide involved. Hey, here's what's going on. Be aware. But I've never had anybody not tell me, hey, what you got? And then come in and say, hey, here's how I would do this. Here's what I'm seeing. Move your tank band down. If you have it like that, it's going to fall off. And little things like that. We definitely try and keep an eye out. We don't want anybody to not make it back to the boat or not have a fantastic experience. But for the most part, when we're on cattle boats, my wife and I really keep to ourselves. So let's see. So Dean, what is side mount diving to you, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of it for technical diving?
Side mount diving is a way more comfortable, easier, extremely balanced, if done properly, way of diving. What's the difference between side mount and double back mount? Well, if they're isolated, then you don't have an independent source of gas, not a completely independent source of gas, because that manifold has an O-ring that if it goes, you can't stop it. Mm-hmm. So independent doubles, okay, but you still got to put those on your back and walk to the water or whatever. For me, doubles only belong on a boat when the seas are over 3 feet. Otherwise, side mount is, I can take just about any student and have them in perfect trim and balance within, like you said before, 5 minutes, maybe 10, if they're not stable in the water. Now, one thing that people have a really tough time, I don't want to say understanding, but putting the pieces together with, say, hey, how do I become a better diver? If you really want to become a better diver, get to the point where you can hover completely motionless and not move. Because if you're tipping and constantly doing these fin sculls or hand movements to keep yourself in balance, you're not comfortable. You're spending more gas than you need to, because every movement costs energy and energy costs gas. So every little tiny movement is wasting gas. I am so comfortable inside now. If for some reason I tip and list like this, I will just sit there. And it's okay, because it's not going any further. So what do I care, right? Most people start, and it's really funny. But side mount is, first of all, it's the pros. If you have mobility issues, I can't reach my isolators or my valves. A lot of people have trouble doing that. It's much easier to grab your valves here. My legs are too weak or my back is bad and I can't put doubles on their back and walk even 20 feet, let alone some dive sites are, 100 feet or 300 feet. Side mount, you could take one bottle at a time. Side mount, you could take a cart and walk them down to the water or whatever it may be. It offers a lot more flexibility, a lot more mobility, a lot more balance. It's a way better dive. Again, just my opinion. I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that would agree with me, but I'm also 100% certain that there are back mount double divers that I'm never diving side mount. That's bullshit. That's what sucks.
We definitely run into those, and it's typically the people who haven't given it a chance or tried it at all yet.
Most of the time, yes. I will say, guy's name is Rick. If he sees this, he'll probably know it's him. He actually tried wide mount. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before. He tried and he called it wide mount. And I said, look, you can't judge it on a day or two. Give it 15 to 20 dives, because this guy had like thousands of back mount cave dives in doubles. You can't change that quick sometimes. But
no.
If you really give side mount an honest shake, 20 dives, I don't know anybody who wouldn't think it's a way better way to dive because of the balance, because of the ease of mobility. But listen, again, it's subjective. People have different opinions. So
I could agree with that.
Cool.
So Dan, what do you think? What is the biggest problem to overcome in side mount diving?
The biggest problem to overcome. Probably two. There's not much that changes once the side mount instructor gets the student in trim and balanced, right? Mm-hmm. So for anybody who's watching, this is balance left to right. This is trim head to toe, if you don't know. Once the instructor gets you flat, the only thing I see people really having trouble with is switching regs within 300 PSI, because gas has weight. And as you breathe one side, that gas is getting used, and therefore the tank is getting lighter, so it throws your balance off. So then you got to switch to the other side, and you want to stay. I try to teach my students to stay within 300 psi, no more than 4. Even at 300, I can notice a big difference, but that just seems to be sometimes what people have trouble with. Other than that, probably stowing the long hose after a drill. But
I've seen some. A few times. I think we all have seen that the student that's
just stuffing it in blindly. Yep. And then it's out, it's twisted, and it's sticking out to snag something. And yeah, it's much easier if you just reach back, unclip the bottom of the tank, let it hang down, stow it, then put it back up.
Absolutely.
Take some practice.
So if you were to put together a gear equipment list, what do you recommend for side mount diving?
In what environment?
Fair enough. For what you're doing, is there a go-to side mount rig that you prefer for open water, for technical diving, wrecks, and cave? Is there one rig?
The ancillary or the additional gear like cutters and stuff and spools, that is all or environment driven, whether it's a wreck or a cave or open water or reef or lobstering or whatever. Obviously, I'm not going to bring a Hawaiian sling on a cave dive because there's no lionfish or fish in the cave. But just straight up diving, nothing else involved. I absolutely love the Hollis Katana 2. I've had a couple X deeps. I've had the 75. I've dove the 100. I've dove the dive rights. I've dove an armadillo. I've dove quite a few. Yes, I understand that the X Deep and the K2 are very similar, but they're not the same. The K2 has a couple of things that make it, in my opinion, far better harness, especially for teaching. First of all, that QFS, that quick fit system with the Velcro on the butt pad to move that waistband up and down. I can size a K2 in maybe 10 or 15 minutes with the person in front of me. it takes 10 or 15 minutes just to, from what I hear. I never got exceptionally fluent at sizing an X deep because I didn't do it much. But I've heard even once you get good at it, it takes 10 minutes just to adjust something, just to find out you're still a half an inch off. You got to do it again. You got to do it again. You got to do it again. Whatever. There might be people that agree or disagree with that. Whoever you are, wherever you're diving, doesn't make a lick of difference. For me, that K2 shoulder dump right here at your left collarbone is a game changer, because that port right there behind your head, as soon as you pull that, you can hear if gas is coming out. And if it's not coming out, guess what? Water's going in, so stop pulling. And that X-Deep has that dump all the way down on the butt. And I dive a dry suit, so having to vent my suit, vent my bladder, vent my suit, vent my bladder. I got to vent this and then get my butt up, and then vent this and then get my butt up. Just not ideal. The Katana 2 also has baffle walls in the bladder, which don't allow the gas to transfer so much. And probably one of the biggest things, the K2 in between the V-shaped trim stitching, there is a hard plastic plate that does not allow the top to become what's known as a beach ball. It doesn't allow it to curve. So it forces most of the gas to the sides, and then it comes up nice and evenly in the middle. So, and that's huge, especially for people like me who are cave diving or overhead diving. You don't want that sticking up any higher than it absolutely needs to be. And having a hard plastic plate will allow it to scrape across the ceiling instead of getting a little wrinkle in the fabric and snagging it like some other harnesses do.
I'd agree. It's definitely, the K2 was a game changer. And it sounds like you were like me, that I started with the SMS 100 and the 75, and then I looked at the 50, and I've tried some X deeps and went through that process. And when the K2 finally came out and I got into it, it was like, holy cow, this is what side mount diving is supposed to be. Especially when I started this, I pulled it out of the box and I put it on. I made 5 minutes worth of adjustments to get the everything the way I wanted it, and dialed in, jumped in the pool, and I was literally the first dive. I was already trimmed, balanced, and in position. I knew where to put my weight. I knew how I wanted it. And I within a half hour total of total time, it was exactly perfect for me. So I'm a K2 fan as well, and what I prefer to teach in. I've taught others, and had the student come in that has the dive right single mount tank that wants to turn it into side mount, and God bless him. I've done it, and I've got him trimmed, but I take him and put him in my K2 and say, okay, I've got you trimmed down to what you have. Just try mine for 5 minutes. And that usually ends up in a K2 sale.
Absolutely. 100%. I agree with that. No doubt. The make this work or try to make that better, or, like, let's call it the 75, right? The SMS 75 was the successor to the 100. The SMS 100 required a ton of tweaks and modifications to make it dive even halfway good for side mount, right? Oh, you can do doubles and back mount. Listen, first of all, if you can't afford to buy a specific kit for the type of diving specifically you want to do, you're probably in the wrong hobby. This is not a hobby where you want to try to, take a whisk and make a line spooling thing with it. Like, you need to have the proper gear to do the proper task, right?
Absolutely.
So the hundreds of dollars, $400 to $500 worth of modifications after you buy the harness for $700 or $800 when it was brand new. Then the 75 came out, which was Hollis's response to all the SMS 100 tweaks, and it did a much better job than the 100. But the biggest thing with the 75 is that those door handles are on top of the bladder. So as you inflate that bladder to stay neutral, the door handles inflate and they go up higher, which thereby lift the tail of the tanks up and down, right? How do you fix that? You put drop rings on the waistband. Oh, that's right. The K2 has them. So the K2 is just, I don't know that there's going to be a lot more that any vendor can change beyond whether you're in the X Deep or the K2. And I believe now, I don't know what it's called, but Dive Right has a very similar side mount harness out also. I've only seen photos of it. So I don't think there's much more you can do to a side mount harness to make it significantly better to warrant spending money on a side mount harness. But
Absolutely.
let's look at it this way: the hundreds of dollars worth of tweaks. My katana too, especially because I do demos and I do, tri dives and stuff. I have kept it as stock as possible. Right. The only mods I have on my K2 from the factory or changed from factory, I've got a bungee chest strap because I just don't like that plastic clip, piece of cake. It's just the chest strap.
Sure.
Other than that, I've just got the bungee mod, which when they first came out, I was in the water with a student. I actually am still diving the very first retail to market K2 that ever came out. A little bit of abuse on it. But when he put his on and I saw that bladder was this far off his back, I could literally stretch my arm up under the bladder and scratch the back of his head. Yeah, that's when I came up with putting a bungee through the bladder and the QFS, and it really holds it down nicely snug. Other than that, yeah, people put on different hardware and stuff, but you don't really need any other major modifications to the K2 other than the bungee mod. But the bungee mod, in my opinion, is a must-have.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And we've the only really major tweak we've done to my wife's or mine or to any of my students is it's one of the first things. My students come in, we're adjusting it up. I've got to adjust it to their body, and then I grab my piece of bungee and I start unzipping their bladder. And they, what are you doing? I says, just trust me. This makes your life a lot easier. Get that all taken care of, and so I just start them out that way so they don't have to realize that that's something they need to do. So that's something we do at every before anybody gets in the pool is that same thing. So glad you brought that up. So in your teaching, how do you approach side mount education with students?
How do I approach side mount education with students?
Yes.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean? How do I approach?
What's your technique? I mean, how do you begin your sessions that make you a little different than somebody else? What do you do when you start in this education? Do you start in just a fitting portion? Do you take it as a holistic? Okay, let's talk about where you're going, what you're going to do. How do you start your approach as a side mount educator?
I size them here in the classroom or at the dive site, but usually in the classroom. Mm-hmm. I size them on land, and I can usually get everything pretty darn close. For instance, the tank bungees that come off here, if you look at the seam on your shirt, which is about mid-torso, that's where the bungee should stretch to, and then we hold with a 1-inch quick link and then a small bolt snap to the shoulder strap up here. That is usually as short as you need it, so you can barely get a thumb in to hook it around the hand wheel on the tank. The shorter the better, because the shorter that bungee is, the higher it's going to pull that tank up, so it's not below the plane of your chest, right? Especially in cave diving. And again, mobility issues aside, because there are people who have shoulder issues or elbow issues that can't always get their hand directly to their side. So if they have to have their tanks a little lower, that's okay. But then I tell them, hey, you know what? That you can't go into something that's this big if your tank is hanging down a little further, right? So you want everything above the plane of your chest and below the plane of your back. You're not going to feel the steel tank dragging across the floor, but you'll feel it across your belly. So if your tank is above the plane of your belly or the plane of your chest, it's safe, it's secure. I guess the biggest thing I can say that I teach for people, and it probably comes from being an overhead instructor, no danglies. When you're horizontal, there can't be anything hanging down below you. Period. And there are people that can't get that, but usually for mobility issues. And then I just stress that they probably shouldn't be cave diving too far back where there's silt. So hopefully those people don't go into caves like that, but I can't control them after they take class.
Sure. And you certainly hope that. That's one of my huge pet peeves. And I started open water with that. Look, let's go ahead and tuck that gauge. Let's get a clip on that. Let's get that tied in, in some way or another. Because the last thing I just drives me batty to see any of my students, even day one, where something is dangling and hanging that can get caught, or even in an open water situation. I also talk to them very clearly. The floor is lava. Stay the heck off the floor. Don't touch the bottom. If you can avoid it, it's just from day one, it's just a good habit to get into.
Absolutely. I tell my students, if they have to touch, I don't want to see a whole hand slam into the floor. I want to see like one finger. Sorry, I got to. I can't help it. At least it shows me that they're being conscious enough that they know they're touching. Most people are, oh my God, I'm negative. They're just pushing off the floor, pushing off the floor, pushing off the floor. Can't do that. Not in a cave, not in a wreck where there's silt.
No.
So not even a lot of quarries. There's a lot of not a lot of movement of water. So a lot of the mud or whatever gets very silty too. So, I'm sure you've been to quarries in Idaho where you get there and you're the first diver in the water on a Friday afternoon or even a Saturday morning, and the viz is awesome. And by the time Sunday afternoon comes, viz is down to like 4 or 5 feet.
Oh yeah. We don't have quarries in Idaho, but we have a hot springs that we go to, and if you look at the bottom wrong, it explodes. And so
Yep.
we had a situation. We were teaching open water last weekend, and the class the day before had done a late class doing stress and rescue, sooting up the bottom to make it more challenging for their stress and rescue. So my 9 a.m. open water had about a foot of viz, maybe 2 feet if I was lucky. It was definitely a fun day, that's for sure.
A foot or two is pretty much what I started with up in the Northeast. When I did my apprentice in full with Paul Heinert, we went to Peacock, and I was with my dive buddy at the time. He's like, Paul Heinert, this is Paul Heinert, like the godfather of cave diving, he's known to be. Oh man, I'm really sorry. The viz is horrible. I'm sorry. I'm like, all right, how bad could it be? What's this? It's like 25 feet. Like, I'm a Northeast wreck diver. I'm used to 2.5 inches sometimes. So 25 feet was not a problem.
Been there's done that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Dean, how can technical divers develop better buoyancy control and trim? And why do you think that's really important?
Better buoyancy control and trim. So, this guy I know by the name of Doug Mudry, he's a GUE instructor. I've heard him mention this. I've never even taken his class, but he constantly talking to other people, and I've overheard him several times talking about balance, trim, buoyancy, and control. I teach BTP, buoyancy, trim, and propulsion, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So back when I first started open water instruction, as an instructor myself, not when I was taking the class, I noticed that people would ask, hey, what's the first skill you teach? Or what's the first skill you teach? Or what do you teach on day one? Or, I'm like, I teach, neutral buoyancy. Well, that's not a skill. You got to teach rig clearing or mass clearing or, whatever. Absolutely not. Buoyancy, trim, and propulsion, in my opinion, are the 3 most fundamental skills. If you can't control your buoyancy, I said this earlier, you can't do something neutrally buoyant. As far as I'm concerned, you can't do it at all. So my full cave students, I tell them they've got to do a backup mass deployment. They cannot have any visual reference. So I want their eyes closed. They can't wrap their arm or touch anything, and I give them 12 inches. They've got to be able to take the mask off, put the backup mask on, clear it, get back into position and look to me for an okay or repeat, and not go up or down more than 12 inches. So that's not an easy thing to do. Most people think it is, and I often have a lot of people have to repeat full cave just for that one skill. Oh, come on, just one skill. I said it earlier on this chat, Benjamin. If you are not full cave ready, there's no such thing as close enough, right? So BTP is super important. One, because you don't want to touch the floor, whether it's a wreck or a cave or a quarry or a hot spring or whatever it may be. The floor's got stuff that can definitely minimize viz. What's the big deal? Minimize viz. I took a night and limited viz class. Yes, that's true. But there are probably other people, or there are potentially other people at the dive site that have not taken a limited viz class. Maybe they're still doing open water, and why you want to ruin, their day and their class and their dive. It can be stressful, it can be nerve-wracking, and it can be life-threatening. So touching the floor, disturbing viz, minimizing viz, definitely not a good thing. Balance and trim, again, like I said before, every movement costs energy and energy costs gas. So if you're constantly doing hand fans to hold your position or get your head up, or you're constantly doing fin sculls to keep yourself balanced and in trim, first of all, you're burning more gas than you need to. How much more? Don't know. Never done a study, but it's more than you need to. And unfortunately, I've been involved in specifically a body recovery where the diver was found probably no more than 70 or 80 linear feet from his next bottle. How many breaths is 70 or 80 feet? I mean, even if you have to, really stretch it, I could probably swim 70 or 80 feet with a single breath or two, maybe 3 or 4. That's not a lot. That's really not a lot. What is that? Maybe 100 PSI? It can make a difference. So, like I said earlier, practicing so that you can hover completely motionless and working on your breathing is super important. Now, you've heard this, right? Don't ever hold your breath, right? Yeah. Open water, day 1, don't ever hold your breath. But let's be honest, after you pass open water class, you start hearing about skip breathing and holding your breath. And I don't do that. My RMV is about a 0.5. And it's worse when I teach, because when I'm teaching, I'm not even thinking about my breathing. I'm only paying attention to my students. Getting to the point where you can, what I call dynamic breathing. Hey, you know what? I'm swimming along and I want to go up a little bit. So instead of breathing let's just call it 40 to 60%, I'm going to breathe 40 to 80%, right? So my lungs are a little fuller, so that's going to bring me up. And if I want to go down, I'm going to breathe that 20 to 60%. So I'll go down a little bit. Using your lung capacity instead of constantly injecting and dumping gas, that's just a waste. Everything you put in here has to come out here on the way up. So the more you can do with your lungs, the better. When I go to Bonaire, we run trips to Bonaire every year. I typically dive a aluminum 100 cubic foot. I take a bigger tank because I want to be first in and last out, because I have 19 to 20 people that are there with me and I'm kind of sort of responsible for it. Aluminum backplate. I will dive nothing but a swim trunk and a dive skin. I don't need lead, and I do not ever need to hit my inflator. I can go from the surface all the way down to 130 feet just on my lungs. Well-balanced kit is super important.
Being well-balanced is something I believe firmly in, that overweighting your students is a disservice to them and a danger to the environment and to them as well. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Miss Mills feels the same way.
Absolutely. So, Dean, we're closing in. What are some of the most interesting and challenging technical dive sites that you visited, and what made them technical, challenging, or special for you?
Technical and challenging. I'd have to probably say the CIC room in the Oriskany. It was kind of sort of a trust me dive, but the person that I was with was probably the person on the planet with the most dives on the Oriskany. But I trusted him for navigation, and there was a line, and I was really excited to be there. So I will admit that I probably wasn't diving as much as as much as I should have been. I was just I've only been there once, so I was just enthralled with everything in that room. So that was pretty cool. Challenging, really, really small, tight passages in caves, because when you get back far enough in a cave, you can't go through some of these things without causing a no-viz. And causing it on the way in is one thing, but if you cause it on the way in, you're going to have to swim through it or swim with it on the way out. So it can be kind of challenging and unnerving knowing, hey, am I going to do like a really bad job and totally blow the viz, where my buddy and I are doing a no-viz, lights out, touch contact all the way out, or, so it can be a challenge.
Fair enough. What's the one tip you can give technical divers out there, either side mount or twin sets, that you feel would benefit them the most?
The one tip specifically for tech divers. Let's go back to the complacency thing. Don't ever let yourself get complacent. Don't ever think it can't happen to you. Don't ever think that anything you have with you cannot fail, because whether it's nature or man-made, everything will sooner or later fail.
Fair enough. Tell me about your biggest oh shit moment. We all have to have them. What's your biggest oh shit?
My biggest oh shit moment. So Ginny Springs, North Florida, was definitely my worst. It was just after my full cave class, probably dive 7, maybe 8. It was my first solo full cave dive. And I was diving Side mount. No, sorry. I was diving back mount. I was diving my HP 119s. And there is a section called the catacombs, and fairly small-ish. You can't go two divers side by side. I went in there. Again, people don't know what they don't know. I went in there without a line, and it's not very intricate, but unless you know your way, it can get a little concerning, especially an open circuit when you have a very finite amount of gas and not hours worth of diving on a CCR. So kind of got 3 circles in there, or 3 times I thought I was going to find my way out and didn't. So I started getting a little nervous, scatterbrained, whatever you want to call it. Then I finally got out into what they call the gallery, got back to the line. I'm like, all right, I still got some gas. So I'm going to head in. So now I'm going from the floor and I'm swimming up towards the ceiling where there's less flow, and I want to be there. And I don't know exactly. I didn't feel anything, but all of a sudden I took a breath and it went, and I just sucked on steel. I'm like, okay, my gauge looks good. No gas. Okay, the necklace works. So I wound up rolling. I must have, while I was working through the catacombs, I must have just tapped my valve a couple times. And the next time I hit it, once I was out of the catacombs, I must have just closed it all the way. But if your brain tells you you're out of gas, even if you've got pressure on your gauge, your brain says you're out of gas. Guess what? Your body is going to respond like you're out of gas.
Sure.
So remember earlier I said my first oh shit moment, I was like, there's a realization where you can die right now. After that, my next, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 dives, I spent almost the entire dive. Wow, I could die right now. I could die right now. And I almost stopped diving, but I worked through it. Thank God.
Thank God. Well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
So, Dean, what are you currently working on that we should be watching out for? What's on the horizon?
Ooh. So, you can't really see it, but right over there on the floor, there is a sign from my podcast. It's called Into the Overhead with my buddy Josh. We are working on a documentary.
Ooh, that sounds
Can't really
exciting.
say much. I'm sorry?
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, I can't really say much about it because I don't want to give away too much, but it's going to be awesome. Let's just say you might see it places other than YouTube. So yeah, that is hopefully going to work out really well. We just did another shoot like a week ago where we interviewed 4 more people. We still got some other recordings we have to do and B-roll type stuff. It may not even come out for, I mean, honestly, Benjamin, it might not even come out for another year, but hopefully we can get it done before that. And if others get involved, it might take that long, but if they don't, we should have it out within the next couple of months. But it's going to be a pretty phenomenal documentary / safety video.
Excellent. And the name of your documentary is Into the Overhead?
No, Into the Overhead is the podcast that Josh and I do. We're not sure about the name of the documentary yet. I've got a really good idea on the name, but I can't even give that away.
Okay. Well, we'll keep it.
I will call you offline, but we can't put it online.
Fair enough. I'm excited to hear more about that and to know how we can help and how I can help you personally in that as well. So we're definitely, this is a community and the only way we all get there and get far is to go together. You get there, if you want to get there quick, you go by yourself. You want to get there far, you go as a group, right?
Absolutely.
Dean, thank you for your time. I definitely appreciate you taking the time with me today to go through we had a lot of questions and you answered them fantastically. So I appreciate you. Anything else you want to tell us?
Pardon?
Anything else you want to tell us before we go?
Now, if any of your listeners or viewers, if they're looking for overhead training or they're looking for training anywhere in Florida, if it's not me, I've got plenty of friends, but Scuba Techie is my shop. We teach out of New York and Florida right now. Don't forget to dive as if.
Don't forget to dive as if. Dean, thank you.